Hey everybody, what's going on? It's Monday night.
Yeah.
Is it too bright in here? Is it fine? Is it good?
Looks good.
I didn't touch anything, so don't look at me.
Looks good.
Okay, that's good.
Trying to figure it if everything's alright.
Yeah, I mean, it looks fine to me. You know what I'm saying. Hey everybody, what's going on? So, we're doing another thing like we did last Monday. Because we bought the thing with both the haunting pilots on there from 2002. Somebody had the idea, I think it was you, Danny, to talk about the actual pilot show and then also the Hollywood movie that was based on it. So we did that last week with Haunting in Connecticut. So this week we're doing Haunting in Georgia and comparing and contrasting it with the Haunting in Connecticut 2, Ghosts of Georgia.
Yeah.
Which, why on earth did they call it that? Because the second movie has nothing to do with the first movie. They're two completely different cases. I know they were kind of trying to tie it in. It's like, it's a sequel, but it's not. And it just made the title of the second one just seem like really clunky to me. Haunting in Connecticut, except it's in Georgia and doesn't have anything to do with Connecticut. I don't know.
They just wanted the people that saw the first one to see the second one.
Yeah, because it was the same production company and stuff. Not the same director, but yeah, it was the same production company. Gonna say, like Danny said, the TV version is more of a documentary. The Hollywood version is a straight-up horror film. Both good flicks. He says a Hollywood version of this is a little bit better than Haunting in Connecticut. Hollywood version, in my opinion, only because it sort of turns into House of Wax 05, which is awesome. I'm going to say I think out of the two movies, I liked Haunting in Connecticut a lot better.
Yeah.
I think the acting was a lot better. The storytelling was a lot better. This one was okay. Like, the acting was okay, but it seemed a little...
It's very standard to me.
Well, it got a little repetitive. I feel like it didn't really... Like, it kind of spun its wheels for a long time, which I'll kind of get into in a little bit. And just like Haunting in Connecticut, it went wildly off of the real... story, but you know, I guess the first one did that too, so what are you gonna do about it?
Yeah, but it didn't even pretend to follow the Georgia case. Not, you know.
Yeah,
it's
it
got
had
Mr. Gordy in it, but it has their own take of Mr.
about
Gordy.
It.
Yeah, and,
that's about it.
The little girls look kind of the same, but other than that, I really couldn't follow the Hollywood movie too much. It was just too. I just couldn't get into it.
I was having a hard time. And the weird thing about it is that when we were watching it, I had thought that I had never seen it before. But when we were watching it, I'm like, wow, this is really familiar, like some of this stuff. So I must have watched it at some point. I don't really know why. You know what? I might have watched it back when we talked about the Wyrick haunting, which is what both of these were based on.
Yeah.
Like, remember we did a show about it years ago? And I might have watched it back then just for shits and giggles, like to see what was going on. But because I know I've seen it before. But yeah, I don't love it. I didn't love this one. Like I said, the acting is fine. There's like some good actors in it. But I just felt like the storytelling wasn't real like compelling. You know what I mean? And so I kind of found my attention wandering a lot, which doesn't usually happen when I watch movies. I'm usually real attentive. But this one I was just kind of like, what? Kind of looking at my phone and stuff, which I don't usually do. So
now the Haunting series, the Georgia cases. One of the pilot episodes. It's movie length, but it's a documentary. And if you just take the documentary at face value, it seems to be one of the most compelling cases in the entire series, because there's a well-known parapsychologist involved. There's a lot of witnesses from this family involved. But I don't know what the truth of the case is. I don't know if anybody else has actually verified. It's mostly just going by what people say. Say they saw them, say what they heard. There's not a lot of physicality to this case. It's basically, girl sees ghosts. She keeps seeing ghosts. And it turns out people know the ghosts that she's talking about. She can even pick them out of a lineup. Other than that, it's not all that physical. There's not a lot of physical manifestations that I remember.
yeah, it's not a lot of stuff like poltergeist activity or anything like that. It's mostly apparitions, which is subjective. So I kind of get why some stuff. But the thing about it, and I had forgotten this because they didn't do this in the Haunting in Connecticut pilot, did they? Where this one, we're watching it. I wasn't drunk or anything. We were watching it, not yet anyway. But so we're watching it, and I was like, wow, the actress they got to play the mom looks just like her. And then I was like, oh, it is her.
Yeah.
they actually got the actual people to reenact everything.
Yeah.
Which they didn't do that in The Haunting in Connecticut, did they?
No.
And they didn't do that subsequently.
They didn't do that in the series.
The series either. So it's like that. I thought maybe that was just they were trying it out to see if it would work. Because I'm like, wow, they really like nailed that. And then I was like, oh, that is her.
Must have been more than one production team working in different places at different times. And in this particular one, they had all the witnesses and they were willing to reenact it. So that's what they did.
And I thought, honestly, for not actors, I thought they did a pretty good job.
Good job, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it looks like they got everybody, like the actual people, to reprise their roles in the real life drama. You know what I mean?
And they are Southern as fuck.
Oh my goodness.
The accents, man. I was going, oh yeah.
We were doing the accents the whole time.
Yeah. Reminds me of Mississippi. Like,
we were doing that.
I forget what they sound like until I hear it again. Like, oh yeah. And they were kind of period accents from the 90s. 80s and 90s, because it does change over time.
Yeah.
You know? But because like young people in Mississippi don't quite sound like people that grew up in the 80s. There, things morph because of the effects of cable TV. It had a lot to do with it. But Hainted Holler.
Yeah.
Talking about that. Okay, yeah. Hated Holler. Yeah.
I mean, yeah. Just like every time somebody said something, it's like it just tickled the shit out of us.
Yeah.
Because it's like, well, it's kind of sounded like my dad's side of the family. They're not from Georgia. They're from Tennessee, which is close enough. And some of my dad's side of the family sounded like that.
Yeah.
So, they had thick accents like that. So it's just kind of like...
Mississippi, Alabama sound identical.
Yeah.
Identical. There are differences between Mississippi and Georgia, but a lot of it is real familiar. They say things the same way we would say things.
Yeah.
But just funny. It's funny to hear it.
See it is, yeah. Danny Rolling's talking about Katie Sackhoff, who was the redheaded. She played the aunt in the Hollywood version of this, which you recognized from Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah.
Said also, yeah, that's right. And she was also in Halloween Resurrection, he said, and in White Noise too. Yeah, I remember not loving White Noise too. I like the first one was pretty good, but the second one I remember not making much of an impression. But I'll give it another go.
She's
one of
cute.
These days.
She's cute.
She is, yeah. I really liked her character in the
She's still in real good shape too. I think she's my age. I think she's about 50, maybe coming up on 50.
Yeah,
she's
maybe
probably a couple years younger.
The movie, the Hollywood version of that came out in 2013, so it's 10 years old. Yeah. So, however, she was 10 years younger in this movie than she is now. You know what I mean? Yeah. Samantha points out the mom and her sister were from a place called Hainted Holler. Yeah.
Hainted Holler. Yeah.
Hainted Holler.
Yeah.
Or Haunted Hollow, as normal people would say. And I think that, like, she even says that. Like, the lady says that.
We called it Hainted Holler. Some people call that Haunted Hollow.
They were so cute.
Yeah.
They were so cute. I thought they were, like, really funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, Danny said, I like the way the real mother says her husband's name, like, Andy. Yeah, Andy was his name.
Adding a couple syllables.
Yeah, it was several. Yeah. Well, I kind of feel Southern accents in general do that. It's like, it's like a 1 or 2 syllable word and it has like 5 or 6 syllables. You know what I mean?
And there's also...
You gotta stretch it out.
Real hardcore Southern accents, Mississippi, Alabama, they're gendered. The accent that women used was a little bit different than the accent that men used. And the tone. Female tone, usually, especially, that they grew up in the 80s and probably a little bit before, high-pitched and histrionic. They were at the edge of laughing or becoming hysterical at any time. I can't do it. My voice can't go up that high. But they're just...
You're not woman enough, is what you're saying.
Yeah, not enough woman. It's just... and they all sound like they're 12. Yeah. Sound like 12-year-old girls just twittering and just laughing constantly.
Y'all got that recipe for ooey buddy cake?
Yeah.
I probably can't do it either. My voice isn't that
My cousins just couldn't shut up. My female cousins could not shut the fuck up. If they were awake, they were talking. It was a constant stream of fucking chatter.
Man.
Especially when they were teenagers.
I have a hard time dealing with...
shut the fuck up.
I have a hard time dealing with people like that. Not gonna
They'd ask you 3 questions before you had time to answer it. Little Tommy, do you like going out at all? Or do you just stay everyone? Just keep on going. You never get a chance to answer. Do you like going out, or do you like staying home? Or do you like going to the movies? Or do you like to... Or do you like to do... Because they called me Little Tommy.
Little Tommy.
Yeah, because my dad was also Tom.
Because his dad's name is Tom Ross Sr.
So they always call the
Tom's
son
a junior.
Tommy, or Little Tommy. Yeah.
Wildcat said that's why I always hung out with dudes more. Yeah, you know, I had a lot of female friends too, and still do. But I don't know. I kind of found dudes like kind of easier to deal with like back then, I guess, because they weren't always
at the edge of fucking hysteria.
Yeah, it was that kind of thing.
Yeah,
and I was just
Southern women were like that.
I was like, shh.
Yeah, cute, but just
Yeah.
Real high strung.
Like I said, and I have a hard time like hanging around because I'm pretty chill and like laid back, so I can't deal with people that are like on all the time. Yeah. It's like really, it's exhausting.
Yeah. Although the 20s roll around, they're not as bad.
Yeah.
A lot of it has to do with just how young they were.
Yeah. So I think we did a show about the Wyrick haunting a long time ago, like where we talked about the thing. But I mean, that was years ago. So we'll talk about, the episode. So this was actually, I don't know, I really like this episode. And I had forgotten, we hadn't watched it since we did the show about it last time, which was years ago. And I had forgotten how long of a time span it went over. I mean, it pretty much went over until from that little girl, she was like 3 or 4 at the beginning, until she was like a teenager, right? I also forgot that, because I remembered Mr. Gordy, because obviously everybody's going to remember that. But I also forgot that there was like a whole bunch of like scary spirits too. Because you can't just have one like friendly ghost. That's no fun. I kind of feel like, and I'm not saying that like they're just making it up or anything, but I'm just saying for a story to be adapted to a haunting, you can't just have a story where it's like, hey, we had this friendly ghost and it just did nice shit and so we just let it stay. You know what I mean? Because there's no conflict there's no drama, it's not scary. So it's like, even if they do have a friendly ghost, they always have to have scary ones like coming in on the back of it. So I had forgotten kind of about that aspect of it as well, because I remembered the stuff about Mr. Gordy, but that was about it. So at the very beginning, you have this family, like I said, the Wyrick family, and mom's name was Lisa, right? And the dad's name was Andrew or Andy. And they have a daughter named Heidi, who, like I said, I think she was 3 or 4. Now they moved into this house. I don't know where they moved from. They're somewhere else in Georgia, I guess. But they moved into this house in 1988. And it was in Ellerslie, Georgia, which I guess is like a pretty small town. Now, they didn't go too much into this, but they did mention on the show, on the documentary, that the house had been inexplicably abandoned by its previous owners. Which I guess was meant to imply, it was haunted, so they got the fuck out. Although they never really, they didn't say, but they just did imply and they got it for cheap because somebody just took off and left it. So there's that. So not too long after they move into the house, their daughter Heidi starts hanging out, supposedly, with this old man that she sees named Mr. Gordy. Now at first, if your 4-year-old daughter comes in the house and says, hey, I'm hanging out with this old man in the yard, like we're playing, everybody's be like, stranger danger, like red flag, you know what I mean? I'm calling child protective or whatever. It's, you know what I mean? I'm calling the cops. And that's kind of how the family reacted at first, because they thought this was a real dude that she was talking about. And that's super creepy, like having some old dude just like wander into your yard and hanging out with your 4-year-old daughter,
This is Georgia. They knew the names of everybody who were their neighbors. So they didn't know who this Gordy was. He must have come from far away to come hang out with the child.
Yeah, and like I said, anytime like a man wants to hang out with a child they don't know, that's, the
dude went out there with a fucking pistol looking for him.
Be a bad time.
Her dad went out there with
I mean, you can't blame him, but I feel like 99% of dads would do the same thing.
Her dad grabbed a Smith & Wesson auto pistol, fucking went out there.
I'm going to go out there and see what's going on with him.
But he couldn't find anybody.
Yeah, he didn't find anybody.
Yeah.
So this kind of went on for a little while, where she just kept saying, I'm playing with Mr. Gordy, and I'm doing this and that. And the mom said that it got to a point where she's like, Mr. Gordy was even in her room, and she would like bring, like when she would give her like a sandwich or whatever, like she's like, I want another sandwich for Mr. Gordy, and she'd be like just in there talking to a chair and shit.
Yeah.
So after a while, the mom determines, well, okay, so I guess this is like an imaginary friend, which, fair enough. A lot of kids have that. So it's like, at least it's not a real child predator, so that's good. So this kind of went on for a while. They didn't seem terribly worried about it. They said the only thing that was bad about this, neighborhood was that there weren't any other kids in the neighborhood. So she didn't really have anybody to play with. And so they said that the fact that she had this, what they thought was an imaginary friend, was like keeping her happy, you know what I mean? Because she seemed okay, like she didn't seem isolated or anything like that. So they're like, well, it's probably harmless or, you know, whatever. So, but they said, man, she talked about this dude all the time, and they were always playing, and he was pushing her on the swing and all this other kind of stuff. Now, a couple months after this, though, something else happened that was kind of weird and maybe like a little bit more sinister. So at this point, there's like a knock at the front door, and the little girl goes to answer it, which, don't let your 4-year-old kid like just open the fucking door randomly. You know what I mean?
Once again, this is rural Georgia.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, but still, it's still not a good idea.
Everybody knows everybody. You know all the neighbors. It's safe, pretty much.
Yeah, but you know,
little girls
until it's not.
Well, that's just everywhere.
Until
it's like that everywhere, but it's actually pretty safe out there.
Yeah. I'm just saying,
because nobody knows where you live because they don't know that place. You'd never find it.
I wouldn't be letting a 4-year-old kid answer the door, though.
Yeah.
But so she answers the door, and she said that she saw a man standing on the porch, like outside the door, that had, like, his hand was all wrapped up in bandages, and he was, like, had blood all over his shirt. Now, she later said that this man introduced himself as Con. Con! Not that kind of Con. I think it was Con, C-O-N. That ended up not being his name, but that's kind of what she thought his name was. That's what she thought he said, yeah. Now, the hilarious thing is that in the reenactment, which was the real people, other than the little girl, obviously they had to get an actress for that because the actual girl was, you know, a teenager in her 20s or whatever. So the little girl just, like, opens the door, sees this bloody dude standing there, and she's like, what? And then she, like, turns around and, like, goes, her mom's in the kitchen or something, and she goes in there, and she's like, hey, there's a bloody man at the front door, like, just completely calm. And the mom's like, what? Yeah. And, like, she gets a knife, and she, like, goes out there and is like, what the fuck? Like, looking around.
Yeah, there wasn't anybody there.
And there wasn't anybody there. But, you know, the kid had left the door wide open. I would have thought that was a real person, and now they're inside the house, and they're going to murder us. That's what I would have thought. But apparently she didn't think that. I don't know. But so she goes around and looks and doesn't see anything. So at this point, she's kind of like, okay, well, this must be another imaginary thing that the kid is seeing, just like Mr. Gordy is. Because at this point, they had determined, oh, Mr. Gordy's probably her imaginary friend because they never saw him. You know what I mean? Now, so that happened. And then not too long after that, Heidi also started seeing some entity that she called the Dark Figure. She said she never saw his face. He was just, like, shaped like a man, but it was just, like, all black, like a shadow. And it's like he looked like he had, like, a hood or something. So, like, she never saw his face, right? She said she saw that, like, all over the place. And, again, they thought she was just seeing stuff until one night she woke up and she had scratches on her face. And then, I think, like, subsequently, I don't know if it was the same night or, like, the next night or something like that, like, the husband, Andy, he also woke up and had, like, scratch marks on his side. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and it was 3 of them, I guess, so it's, like, that demonic claw mark deal. Although, they didn't say that they thought it was demonic, did they? Well, maybe they did later. Because they did actually kind of get into some religious stuff later. I don't remember exactly what they said. But I don't think that they thought it was demonic at first. You know what I'm saying? I think they just thought it was some kind of whatever.
A ghost.
Yeah. Now, I think, like, for a long time, I think that Heidi was the only person that saw him. But I think the parents did start to think, oh, well, maybe something weird is going on because of that. So at this point, they decide to maybe get some help with this. So they call a very famous parapsychologist, Dr. William G. Roll, who, if you know anything about paranormal anything, he wrote a fuck ton of books in the 70s, because I remember reading a bunch of them as a kid. Pretty well respected, I feel like, as far as parapsychology goes.
He's German. He's a German guy that studied here.
Yeah, and he's very...
real scientific
minded. He's not kind of like, he does use psychics and things like that, but he's pretty quick to try to find, like, a rational explanation for stuff, like, rather than jumping to ghosts or whatever.
He believes a lot of the stuff I basically believe in. He believes that there is paranormal. I know there's paranormal. I've seen it. I see it off and on, even to this day. Which, if you're a regular listener to the show, you know what it is we're talking about, shit that's happened around here in the house. He believes it's mostly human generated, though, through psychic abilities. I agree. A lot of it is that. Poltergeist is that. But I also think there can be outside forces, because I believe that part of you survives after death, because I've had near-death experiences. And so there's a possibility that a person that is no longer incarnated, or some person who's dead, I guess you could say, some part of them can interact with you sometimes. Which he gets into this later on. I kind of agree with most of what he thought it was. The family ends up going to religion for the solution, which I agree with that too, because they believed in religion. And belief and faith is very powerful. And I think that also helped him, you know. Do I think these were actual ghosts of dead people? No. I think they're recorded memories. She accessed recordings of them that were you could interact with. Kind of like, in the way I described it to Jenny, kind of like if you saw Superman 1 and 2, where Superman could interact with his father, who had stored all his memories and stuff in these crystals. He could talk to Jarrell, but he wasn't there. Jarrell was not there, though.
Yeah.
It was just, that's what I think. A ghost, you're probably interacting just with a fragment of something that was left behind.
And
the
I
whole
think
thing isn't there.
Yeah, and I think William Roll said that exact thing.
Yeah.
That he said that fragments of people might
It's a fragment of a person. You can
kind of
interact with them on a limited basis. That's
imprint themselves into the environment.
Yeah, that's and a person with certain psychic abilities can access fragments of that person that were there in the past. Or maybe they weren't even really in that area. Somehow they're accessing people that were entangled with that area. In other words, friends of the family. That's who she's interacting with. Friends of the family.
Yeah, or people who used to live in that area.
Right, which that would also be part of the entanglement, like quantum entanglement. So she's somehow accessing parts of the past that are like holographic, but she's probably only seeing it in her mind. Probably looks real, but if you were to photograph it, there'd be nothing there. It's like kind of like a psychic hologram imprinted into your consciousness. It looks like it's there, but it's not. Like a message. And you can interact with it. Same way, up to a certain point. Because you notice whenever they talk about cases like this, the interaction is never really very long.
Yeah.
A few seconds. And then there isn't, it's always kind of like things out of order. There isn't any continuity to it. Because that's all that's there. It's like pieces of scrap paper thrown around, and you're reading them. You might read them out of order. You don't know which one came first. That's what it is, I believe.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm pretty sure William Roll said that. But he said that later on, because he came to visit the family like early on, when it was mostly just Heidi seeing things. And I think after the dad got scratched too, and they started like thinking about it, maybe, and then they're like, well, okay, we're gonna call him. But William Roll at this point, he was thinking, he went around and he did all the, the scientific like evaluation and everything like that. He thought, and at least his instruments indicated to him, that there was an unusually high like number of positive ions in the house. And I think they did like a geological survey, and they said that there was some kind of like they were on a fault line or something like that.
To me, it all sounded like pseudoscience.
Maybe, and it's just kind of like, well, he was saying that maybe the high number of positive ions, which was unusual, that maybe that is causing hallucinations like in the little girl, because at this point she was the only one that had seen anything. So they're like, well, maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's like altering your perception. So he was not saying, and I mean, he did come out and tell them, he's like, these are not ghosts, they're not real, but it could be like some factors in the environment that are making you see these things. You know what I mean? Now, he did come back later on and kind of reassess, but that's what he said at first. So, the thing about it, like after he left, The weird thing is they decided to look back. I don't remember, did they come across this accidentally or on purpose? They found out that the person that had owned the land before, or he hadn't owned the land, he was like the caretaker of the land that the house was on, was actually named like James Gordy.
Yeah.
And they thought that was pretty weird. And they said then when they took Heidi to the cemetery where he was buried, because he died in like 1974, they said she went right to his grave.
Yeah, she knew where he was.
Like she knew where it was.
Yeah, and she couldn't even read.
Yeah, and they said she was like 3 or 4, and she just went right up to it and said, yeah, that's where he's at.
Yeah.
And they found
if that happened, that's quite compelling.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. So I don't really know if it happened like that, but that's what they said. And they said they also found a picture of him like in his obituary from when he died, and they mixed it in with a whole bunch of other photos and like just laid them out on the table and showed her, and she said, "Oh, that's Mr. Gordy." Like she knew who it was.
What he looked like, yeah.
You know, so they thought that was like pretty interesting. And the thing about it too is that the dude that had showed up at the door, like with the bloody shirt that she called Khan, apparently there was another dude that, you know, worked on the property whose name was Lon, and I think they found out later that he'd had his hand cut off
when he was a little boy.
Like when he was a little boy, like in an accident or something. And so that might have been like what she was perceiving, even though I think that he was a grown-up when she saw him like with a bandage on his hand. But I think like somebody that had lived around there, like a neighbor, said, "Oh yeah, like it was my brother-in-law or some shit like that." It's like, yeah, he had his hand cut off like in a thresher or something like that.
Some kind of machinery.
Some kind of machinery like accident when he was younger. And so that, and his name was Lon. So that might have been, because I think she identified him too in the photo. Because she's like, "Oh, that's Khan, like the guy that came to the door or something," and that was who that was. So, which, like I said, if that's true, that's pretty creepy. That's pretty creepy. So at this point, they call Dr. Roll back, and in light of this new information, he's starting to think, well, okay, well maybe Heidi is a natural medium, and she's picking up this stuff from the environment. So again, he's not saying the ghosts are real or anything like that, but she's just picking up fragments of their personalities from the environment and interacting with them, it seems like.
Which means she's accessing accurate information about people that once were in the area by some unknown means, by psychic means. That's fascinating. Kind of like psychometry. When you touch somebody's watch or something, you know where it's been. So
right.
She's doing something kind of like that.
Yeah.
And maybe she can interact. According to her, they talk to her.
Yeah, because she apparently like played with Mr. Gordy like all the time and like talked to him about all kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much of that was in her mind, or like I said, she was accessing fragments of his personality and interacting with that and kind of constructing conversations from that. I'm not real sure. Like I said, she was a little girl, so it's kind of hard to say.
Yeah, he was asking her if she liked ice cream and stuff like that. Did you want to go playing on the swings and stuff like that? That's all
she's like 4. You know what I mean? It's like you can't really have like big like intellectual discourse with a 4-year-old. I'm just, you know what I mean?
Right.
So it's just kind of that sort of thing.
It just sounds like it was an interaction just to keep her occupied, like a babysitter.
Yeah, it does kind of sound, because maybe she was lonely, and so she kind of like accessed without consciously knowing she was doing it.
Yeah, she was accessing somebody to play with.
Because there was nobody else around, and that's who was around. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so she's using her psychic abilities to pick up recorded memories, and she's kind of like bringing them back to life in her mind.
Yeah.
And she can interact with them. She can see them, just like Superman in the damn Fortress of Solitude talking to his dad. He's not there. But it's recorded memories, though.
And Heidi was actually on the show, like being interviewed. And like I said, she was a teenager in her 20s or something like that. And she said that she saw ghosts just like she saw regular people. Yeah. That they just look like regular people. Yeah. Like they just look normal.
Yeah.
So
whatever it is, it's strong enough to... the effect is strong enough to convince you that it's there.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like a ghostly apparition or anything.
Which is interesting.
It's an alternate. It's a some kind of a different state of consciousness.
Yeah.
You know how like when you're what do they call it? Sleep paralysis, where you can open your eyes you see the room around you, but you also see dream material, like a person standing there. They're not really there.
Right.
Must be something kind of like that. It must be like that to experience it, kind of like sleep paralysis.
Yeah, except being like wide
But you can
awake
walk
and
around and
walking
talk,
around.
yeah.
Right. Which, like I said, I've only had that happen one time.
You're
and that was,
interacting
like,
with an
pretty freaky.
illusion. But it's accurate. The information, it's an accurate representation of that person that used to exist. Weird.
It is pretty weird.
Yeah.
So, as I said, the documentary kind of covered a while. So they said as Heidi got older, she didn't see Mr. Gordy as much anymore. And it was almost kind of like, you know, after a few years, like she said she didn't see him anymore. But they said that like the other paranormal activity kind of got worse and it kind of got more sinister. The dark figure that she saw, like the hooded figure, that kind of showed up a lot more. And other family members started to see it. Also, several of the family members said that they saw the ghost of a little girl, like running around in the house. So that was something. And I think that even people that visited them, like saw apparitions or like heard weird noises and shit like that. Now, at this point, I think they were not real satisfied with Dr. Roll's investigation and like the explanation that he gave them. So at this point, they decided they were going to call some psychics, so like paranormal, you know, investigators, kind of. So they got two different ones, and they talked to one who, what's her name? Amy Allen? Yeah, she was on the Dead Files, that show on Discovery or TLC or whatever the hell it's on. She was on here, and she was on this case too. And basically, she came in and said that that there were a bunch of spirits in the house. Some of them were fine, like were benevolent, and some of them were evil, obviously. Another psychic that came in said pretty much the same thing, but I feel like the second psychic was more on board with the Wyricks themselves, who, like I said, were very religious. And they showed them at their actual church and everything, which seemed a little, you know, fire and brimstone. It was just kind of that kind of thing a little bit, like laying on of hands and all that. And they started to think that maybe the evil things were demonic, where it seems like the first psychic, Amy Allen, didn't think that. She just thought, well, some of the bad spirits were just like assholes in life, and now they're assholes after death too. Whereas like the second psychic seemed to be like more on the religious bent, where they were like, yeah, these are probably like demonic. These aren't humans. They're probably like demonic forces or whatever. So, because I think the second psychic also went to the same church as them. They did actually, in the documentary, they did kind of go to the church with them and stuff, which was a little was a little weird to see. But yeah, because all that kind of stuff, I didn't grow up like that, so it's a little weird to me. But yeah, so they had the pastor there, who they talked to him a little bit on the documentary as well, and they, you know, prayed for the family and all that. But the thing about it is that, it seems like this haunting or whatever it was never really resolved, because they lived in this house for a while. Like I said, they moved in 88 when Heidi was 4, and then I think they lived there for, I think, until she was a teenager, and then maybe a few years after that. I'm not real entirely, but they lived there for quite a while, and apparently she kept seeing stuff the whole time, and other family members saw stuff too, and they didn't really know what to do about it. They didn't really seem to, I don't know, they didn't really say that they were going to try and get an exorcism or anything like that, but they were almost just kind of like, well, we're just going to use our faith or whatever and just like deal with it, because there doesn't really seem to be anything they can do about it. So they just thought they would maybe live with it. So they lived there for a while and then moved out. What apparently happened after that, Heidi, as far as I'm aware, I don't know what she's doing nowadays. I think if she was 4 years old in 1988, she'd probably be almost 40 now, right? If I'm not mathing incorrectly. But as far as I know, for a long time afterward, like, she still sees ghosts, like, all the time. They said in the documentary that it's like if you have that ability, like, it never goes away or whatever. So she, I think they went into this a little bit on the documentary too. Like, when she was a teenager, she said, like, all the people in town, you know, they heard about the whole haunted house thing, and it's a small town, you know what I mean? So everyone was, like, kind of making fun of her. So she said that kind of sucked a lot, that she was famous and everybody kind of picked on her about it. But apparently she just kept seeing stuff for the rest of her life. Like I said, I don't know what she's doing nowadays because this was a while back. This came out in 2002. So like I said, she's probably almost 40 now. And I imagine she still sees stuff. So there's that. And that's kind of where they left it, because there really wasn't a lot of resolution to this one. They moved out of the house eventually, but I guess she still sees stuff.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of the ability she had. And they never did find out what the deal was with the ghosts, or were they demons, or whatever the hell. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I believe her.
I mean, yeah. I mean, she's not... She didn't seem like she was making stuff up. You know what I mean?
Too many witnesses in the family.
Yeah.
As long as the story's true, they didn't make it up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I would think that it's true. I mean, I had weirder shit that happened to me than what happened to her.
Danny says the real family even makes an appearance in the Hollywood version as well, which is cool to see. Yeah, they showed their photos at the end. But see, I kind of wondered about that, because I watched that because they had a photo of all of them at the end, like right before they rolled the credits, and they they put all their names on there. But then I was just kind of like, I wonder how they felt about, like, when they watched this movie, because the movie doesn't have hardly anything to do with the case at all.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Ian England said, "Love that necklace, Jenny. Thank you very much." Yeah, I like this too. I've had this for a little while. But yeah, so let's talk about the movie.
Hold on, one thing.
What?
1 second. Now, one of the reasons why I believe her is because, even my whole life I had weird shit happen to me. Even before Mammoth happened, I would dream true a lot. As a kid, I'd dream things and they'd come true. And I think a lot of people when they're young have that. But I don't remember exactly what it is that I dreamt true. So maybe my memory is slightly faulty, you know what I mean? Maybe I just dreamt real random common shit and it would come true. But I remember it being personal things, what was going to happen to me, or what something that somebody would say to me. But it's been so long I don't remember the exact details of the dream. But one thing that I do remember that happened to me, I was in the 3rd grade. I think I was in the 3rd grade at the time. I was watching television. Both my parents were at work. And the telephone rang so loudly that I fucking nearly jumped out of my skin and went running to the telephone. And it only rang once. I almost didn't pick it up. It was like maybe they hung up. But I picked it up and listened. And I could hear 2 people talking to each other on the phone. And I was like, hello, hello. They couldn't hear me. And I realized who it was I was listening to. I was listening to my aunt talk to somebody else. And they had a whole conversation. And it lasted, I don't know, 30 seconds maybe? Maybe a minute. And I was going, hello, hello. And I was trying to get their attention, but they couldn't hear me. And I said, this is my Aunt Lana. Which I had only seen Aunt Lana a couple times, really. And she didn't live anywhere near me. Well, the voices just faded away. And I was like, wow, that's weird. Maybe it wasn't them. It was just some... I figured, I was a kid. I was like, maybe there's just something wrong with the telephone. And I hung it up. Went back, watched television. 10 minutes later, a car pulls in the driveway. It was my Aunt Lana. And she was with her new husband that she'd married. I'd never seen the guy. He asked where my mom was, and I said, oh, they're at work. He's like, come on with us. We'll get something to eat. So I jumped in the back seat. And they're driving, and all of a sudden I realized that they're having the same conversation I heard on the telephone. And I said, I just heard you guys talking about this on the telephone. And they looked at me like I was fucking crazy. I said, yeah, I heard you. I picked up the telephone and I heard you guys talk about this. And they were, yeah, okay. They blew me off. Because I was just a kid.
Yeah, and it's just, that's a weird thing to say. So
yeah.
Like, whatever, kid.
Yeah. I said, I heard you guys talk about this on the telephone. So it was a premonition.
Yeah. Even though it wasn't anything important.
No.
Which is probably how most
I
shit
got
happens.
somehow got a psychic warning that my Aunt Lana was on her way over, and you were going to hear what they were going to say, and I heard what they were going to say in the future, and they were talking about my mom, and it was verbatim.
That's pretty weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've told me that story before.
Yeah.
But like I said, I just thought it was funny that it's like you get a premonition, but it's about something that's like not
Yeah.
really all that
Well,
important.
could be that this girl was having something kind of like that, but they were premonitions of things that happened to the past in the past.
Like
to other people.
Post-cognition.
Yeah, like
I
post-cognition.
guess. Right.
She's accessing it.
Danny Rowling said, the Hollywood version makes the mother look crazy. It does. And I will say that it also makes the mom's sister, the aunt, look kind of like, not a bum, but somebody who doesn't have their life together and is just kind of like, hey, I'm moving in with you guys, all right? Because I kind of feel like they didn't go super into this on the documentary. Because they did talk to the sister and all that, who looked like she had her life together, you know what I mean? When Lisa and Andy bought the house in Georgia, in real life, apparently the sister, they asked, it's like, oh, why don't you come and there's like property next to us or a house that's empty next to us for sale. Like, why don't you move out here? And then, you know what I mean? Because she could look after the kid and all this other kind of stuff. And they wanted to be close to family and everything. So I think that's how it was. In the movie, they made it look like the sister had just broken up with, you know, one of a long succession of dudes. So there was that. And she's like, yeah, I'm just broke. And she just like moves into this, like pretty much invites herself. Like she shows up at the house with her shit all in the trunk. And like the husband already knows. He's like opens the trunk and it's like, I know. Yeah, like he already knew. And she moves into like this old beat up trailer, like a mobile home on the property. Like I said, that's not really what happened. I think the sister actually bought a house or bought property next to theirs so she could help out with the kid and everything like that. So I think they kind of did the sister a little bit dirty also. And in the movie, they made the mom, they leaned very hard on the generational psychic angle, because they even started the movie with the mom, Lisa. Everyone's names were the same as the real people in the movie. They didn't change the names like they did in Haunting in Connecticut. But yeah, everyone had the same names. But they implied that Lisa and her sister, what's her sister's name? Shit, now I can't remember. I have it written down, but now I can't remember what it was. Sylvia? I'll remember in a second. But whatever the sister's name was. So that both of them also had psychic powers, and their mom had psychic powers. Like they had visions and stuff, and like saw dead people. But they kind of had it so that Lisa, the mom, she hated it, and so she was basically like medicating herself to make it stop. Whereas the sister was kind of more freewheeling about it, and just like, man, you just gotta like chill and like let it happen. And she's kind of the one that's telling the kid, Heidi, oh, it's okay, you know, we both have it too. We were born with the veil. And actually there was a book written about Heidi Wyrick, you know, the real one, which was called The Veil. So maybe they went more into that in the book, and maybe that's where they got the idea from the Hollywood movie. They didn't talk about that in the documentary though, or at least they didn't talk about it that much. You know what I mean? Because did the mom, Lisa, did she say that she saw anything, or the sister saw anything? Like, yeah, they saw some shit later, but I don't think they said, oh, we grew up seeing dead people.
No.
But they leaned real hard on that, like in the Hollywood version, like Haunting in Connecticut 2, Ghosts of Georgia.
Genetic.
Yeah, that it was genetic, which maybe it is. I've heard that before, but they leaned real hard into that. So they actually did kind of make the mom look like a little bit of a lunatic, because she was just kind of like, oh, I've always been able to see dead people, but I don't want to see dead people, so I'm taking all this medication to like make it stop. You know what I mean? So she seemed like she was flipping out a little.
Having the veil, they must be talking about that placental thing, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can explain that to him.
Yeah, it's just that, well, it's a very old,
it's an old myth.
Wives' tale, like an old myth about a baby that's born with kind of like it's like a little bit of like a skin kind of thing, like this glimmery kind of skin
goes over
thing, like over their face.
Over their face, yeah.
And I've also heard it called a call.
Yeah.
I've heard it called that too. If there's an old wives' tale that if a baby is born with that over their face, that means they have second sight, that they're a psychic. Yeah. So that's kind of what they were getting into with this. They were kind of talking about that folklore which I thought was kind of interesting because I always thought that was an interesting bit of folklore. But yeah, they leaned real hard on that. So I guess what they were trying to do in the movie was they were trying to introduce conflict, because when Heidi starts seeing what appears to be dead people, when she sees Mr. Gordy, and then they find out later on that Mr. Gordy was a real person and all this other kind of stuff, that there's going to be conflict because the mom doesn't want it to be true, because she's wanted to raise her like not like that, you know what I mean? Because she doesn't like it, so she doesn't want her daughter to have to go through the same thing. So I guess I see where they were going with it. Now, really, okay, so the beginning of the movie, other than all the stuff with the mom actually seeing visions of her mom, and other things, like seeing premonitions, kind of. The first part of the movie, maybe the first 20-ish minutes, kind of... What is she doing back there?
Playing with the carpet.
Oh, okay. Kind of goes along. You know, Mr. Gordy shows up. They make him look more sinister, I guess.
Yeah.
And for a while... Because I've seen this movie before, but I kind of forgot where they went with it. So for a while, I think you were in the bathroom during this point, but for a while, they're almost making it seem like Mr. Gordy was like a bad guy, like the villain. Like, he doesn't end up being, spoiler alert, but they did kind of like set it up like that a little bit at the beginning. So they kind of make him sort of scary and all this other kind of shit. But then they get into all these other ghosts that people are seeing, and then there's other things going on, like Andy, the dad... like their dog gets caught in this trap in the woods, and they find a bunch of other ones, and they're like, oh, well, whoever lived on this land before must have been, you know, a trapper or whatever. And then they say, yeah, there was this guy that used to live here who was a taxidermist, and he was also part of the Underground Railroad. So he would hide escaped slaves and like help them, you know, along their way or whatever. And he had like all these hiding places where he would put them and all this other kind of shit. So apparently like a lot of the ancestors of those escaped slaves like now kind of come here like for pilgrimage or whatever. Which all of that I just said, that doesn't have anything to do with the original story. None of the stuff about the Underground Railroad, none of the stuff about the, you know, the underground, you know, the pit down there or anything like that, or the guy that was a taxidermist or anything, that doesn't have anything to do with like anything that happened at the real story. So it's like they just added all of that. Well, like I said, it was kind of like The Haunting in Connecticut, where they added the whole thing about you know, the guy trying with the psychic and with the bodies with all the spells on them, like all the black magic. So that's kind of the thing. They're taking a story, like the bones of the story, and adding all of this frippery to it. So Mr. Gordy was the guy in the movie who owned the property prior. And like I said, they're trying to almost make you believe that he was a bad guy because the pastor comes to the house and says, oh, well, I hope you guys are friendlier than the last guy that owned this place, James Gordy. Man, what an asshole that dude was, or anything like that, because he didn't want people on his property. Because they said because this was on the Underground Railroad, like, you have people coming through, like, wanting to see it. You know what I mean? Because it's kind of, like, historical. So they're kind of trying to set it up like Mr. Gordy is a bad guy and, like, the little girl is in danger and all this other kind of shit. But it turns out, spoiler alert, like I said, this movie's 10 years old, so don't come at me. But it turns out that the dude who was... he was Mr. Gordy's ancestor. What the fuck was his name? I can't even remember now. The taxidermist guy?
Yeah. He
was helping some escaped slaves get out. But then some of them, he's like, oh, I kind of like this one, so I'm going to keep it. And then he was taxidermying them. So he was like a serial killer, essentially, is what he was doing. And so I guess it's weird because I was reading a synopsis of the plot. And the synopsis said that, because the story went in the movie, that the taxidermist, like all the townsfolk who they were implying were in the Klan, found out that he was helping slaves, so they dragged him out his house, they cut him open and stuffed him like you would a taxidermied animal, and like killed him, you know what I mean? And everybody's like, oh my god, that's so horrible because he was such a nice man. But then it turns out that he was the bad guy. The weird thing about it, though, is that the plot synopsis I read said, yeah, all these like Klan people came and killed him and stuff like that. I said, but the implication was that the escaped slaves or friends of theirs or something like that found out that he was a serial killer, and they were the ones that killed him. It wasn't the Klan.
Yeah.
Like, because they just showed them putting hoods on.
Yeah.
Like, not white hoods, not like Klan hoods, just like regular bag hoods, you know what I
That's
mean?
kind of how they started, though.
Yeah. But I'm just saying that I think they were trying to set it up as though that was because that was what the story was.
Yeah.
But then you find out later that guy was actually a serial killer and nobody knew.
Yeah.
So they were the ones that found out, like, because they found this big pit and it's like where he'd been keeping the slaves that he kept, and like he starved them down there. And then he would like turn them into taxidermy because they end up finding like the taxidermy.
There were actually 3 clans in different eras. This is kind of ahistorical because the clan, as you would know it, only started after slavery. That was over already, so they didn't have anything to do with that. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
That was Reconstruction era.
Yeah.
That's when they really, if you looked at what they were at, yeah, they tried to get in the way of fucking voting rights. That's one of the things. The race war kicked off here fucking almost instantly. But their main thing was trying to fight Catholics. A lot of people don't know that. They did not like the fucking federal government, and they were paranoid about Catholics. They didn't really care that much about black people until that was later. And then like the third clan, that's what you have now. But there's not many of them. Basically, neo-Nazis is what they're kind of like.
Yeah.
They're just not around anymore either. The second clan, that was the Invisible Empire. They were big in the 50s, 40s, and 50s. They were fucking huge. But they're gone now. They were nowhere near the size. It's because the guy, their leader, got arrested for down raping a woman on a train. That was the end of that. They all left because they were Christian. They had people forget that those were Christian groups.
Yeah.
So fucking. But the Invisible Empire fucking vanished because the leader was a crook.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see. Zach says, Jenny, have you ever written a story about premonitions? Always thought they were a really cool storytelling device. I don't think I have, although I will say that one of my very favorite movies about a premonition is The Psychic, which is a Lucio Fulci movie. Kind of like a Giallo, but it has like supernatural elements, and I feel like it's one of his underrated ones. It's also called Seven Notes in Black. But the whole thing is like the woman is a psychic and she has a premonition at the beginning, which is kind of disjointed. And you think that it's going to go one way, but it's really satisfying because you watch the movie and then all of the stuff that she saw in her vision is like recontextualized. It's really clever. I feel like Dardano Sacchetti wrote the screenplay. He also wrote House by the Cemetery and a lot of his other gore films. But so if you haven't seen Lucio Fulci's The Psychic, if you're into movies about premonitions, that's one that I really, really like a lot. I just find that really satisfying, that the resolution of that.
DVD Dragon's asking me if I experienced anything paranormal in the Army. I said, yeah. A near-death experience and an out-of-body experience. Yeah, I talked about it. Did a show on it. There's another episode we did, and it's called Out-of-Body Experience.
Yeah, I think that's what it was called.
Yeah. And I tell the whole story in there.
Yeah. Zach says, how good were the accents in the show versus the movie? Yeah. They toned down. They still had kind of Southern accents in the movie, but like way toned down from the actual people. Probably, you know what I mean? They wanted to like give the impression that the people were from Georgia, but they still wanted people to like understand what they were saying, I guess. So they like the accents weren't as thick. But yeah, so I will say, much like, here's the problem that I had with both of the Hollywood versions of these. While I don't begrudge them adding a backstory, because it's a fictional story, it's like you can't just have, and then there were all these random ghosts wandering around and it didn't mean anything. It's a fictional story. It has to have a structure. So I get if you want to like add a backstory. Haunting in Connecticut, they did the whole thing with the black magic seance thing and like the guy wanting to use the dead bodies to amp up the psychic's powers or whatever the fuck it was, and like with all the dead bodies in the house. And in this one, they added the backstory of this serial killer who was actually killing escaped slaves while ostensibly helping them escape on the Underground Railroad, which is kind of a cool idea for a backstory, but again, I feel like it's a little convoluted. There was just too much, I don't know, there was too much going on. You know what I'm saying? It's just too much going on. I think they should have like simplified the backstory a little bit. And I will say that the Hollywood version of the movie, I feel like the whole middle section of the movie was basically just that damn girl, that little kid, running off into the woods. Like, I was like, would somebody please watch her? She just keeps, like, running off. She gets up in the middle of the night. She sees a ghost standing out in the yard, and she, like, runs out there into the woods and stuff like that. And then, like, so I feel like the whole middle part of it, and I know this isn't an exaggeration, but I feel like the whole middle part of the movie was just her parents running around in the woods in the dark being like, Heidi, Heidi! Like, they kept losing her. You know what I mean? So it's just kind of like, that's what I meant when I said it felt like the middle of the movie. It was just kind of like spinning its wheels, because it just felt like a lot of it was her seeing stuff, running off, and then like her parents like frantically like looking for her because they can't keep an eye on her for 5 seconds. You know what I mean? So there's that. Like I said, I liked the idea of the whole Underground Railroad thing. I think that would have been a cool thing, but I think I just think they overcomplicated it too much. And they did that with the first movie too. I feel like they should have streamlined the backstory. Well, and the thing about it is that this story in particular, and even the Haunting in Connecticut story, probably more than this one, because this one, the Haunting in Georgia, the real quote-unquote story, it doesn't really have a narrative either. You know, because it's like, yeah, she saw Mr. Gordy, he hung out, he was fine for a while, and then she didn't see him anymore, but then she saw like some scarier ones, and the end, that was like pretty much it. They didn't know, you know, who those ones were or anything like that. But Haunting in Connecticut, I felt like had a little bit more of a story to it, because at least there was the whole human drama about, like, you know, the kid, and he was dying of cancer and all that other kind of stuff, and him kind of getting taken over and that. So I kind of feel like they had less excuse with the first one to kind of go wildly off script and like do their own shit with it. I didn't mind what they did, but I just thought it was too much. It was too overcomplicated. This one doesn't have as much, I don't want to like, not as much substance to it in the sense of like a narrative story, because it's just like a bunch of random ghosts. And it's like, yeah, it was this guy that used to live here and shit like that. So I can see why they had to add more story to it, but I just don't know. I don't know. I just feel like it was too much. And then they kind of concentrated a lot too on the mom, like learning to, you know, there's kind of this repeating thing through there where she's supposed to like let them in, because all these ghosts were like asking for help, like for their bodies to be found and all this other stuff, and she didn't want to deal with it because she didn't want like her psychic powers. So at the end she has to actually like let them all in, like to release them or whatever. So they almost kind of made it more the mom's story than the daughter's story, if that makes any sense. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, which, like I said, fine, but I don't know. I didn't love it. I just found my attention wandering a lot during the second one.
Yeah, I didn't think it was very good. I didn't think it was a compelling story. It was too complicated.
Yeah, and
it started to veer too far away from the case. They should have kept it what it was.
And like I said, if they needed to add a narrative structure, which you do because it's a movie, but you could have come up with something simpler than what they came up with. Because they were trying to incorporate Mr. Gordy, who was from the real case, and they were trying to incorporate him in a way that was like, oh, well, let's make him seem like the villain at first, but then it turns out that he was a good guy all along, just like he was in real life. But then we have to add all this other story, and it's like a twist, and it's like, you know, this guy we also thought was a good guy, he was really a bad guy. And so they were trying to like do a switcheroo, which is fine, but I feel like they, like I said, I think they overcomplicated it. Also, the editing in this was real kinetic, let's put it that way. So there was a lot of, and I feel like there's a lot of horror movies. It's getting better now, thankfully, but I feel like in the 2000s and in the early 2010s, a lot of horror movies, especially kind of big budget ones like this, were let's just like flash all this imagery. And it was like boom, 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 you know what I mean? And it's just like, please stop that. You know what I mean? It's just like it's not scary. It's just like annoying after a while. So I kind of feel like that was an issue also. Like it kind of had that like real hyperactive editing style like during parts of it, which I don't really like. With that, and I think that's kind of why I didn't like a lot of big budget Hollywood movies from the 2000s. You know what I mean? Like the 2000s and the 2010s. It's still until they started chilling out and like not doing that so much later on. But I mean, this came out in 2013, but it still has that early 2000s that 2000s editing, which kind of drives me crazy. You know, I like I said, the 90s, and I've talked about how much I really don't like a lot of horror movies from the 90s. Maybe the 2000s are worse. Especially because a lot of it was just remakes. You know what I mean? Just kind of big budget, soulless remakes of
trying to be as sensational as possible.
Classics. Yeah,
and it's not effective. They're not scary at all.
They're really not. Like I said, it had like a lot of hyperkinetic editing. It's just kind of like, well, we're going to take this, you know, classic story that had just like regular looking people. Everyone's going to look like a model. You know, it's just going to be, it's just very slick. And I don't really like slick horror movies. It doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
And so I kind of feel like a lot of the 2000s horror movies were like that. And this one was not as bad as that, but it did have a little bit of that lingering stench to it. Yeah. I'm gonna say, you know what I mean? But that's that. Yeah, Danny Rowling said the sackhead conductor, aka scarecrow conductor. Yeah, I mean, I do like people with sacks over their head. It is kind of scary. Yeah, John Gore said the Klan was infiltrated by feds in the 1950s and 60s to absolutely turn public opinion against them. They reviewed it just yesterday.
Yeah, man, it'd be great to do a show on them. But
somebody just asked, like Zach said,
to doing a show on the Klan would be a huge shit show. But it is a fucking. The comment section would be a shit show, but it
might be interesting.
It would be interesting because an interesting topic. You'd really have to dig into shit because you can't really trust any information that you hear about it. Because what ended up happening is the Klan was very convenient. All right, very convenient for Southerners. They could blame everything bad about the South on the Klan. Well, they did it. Nah. Okay, Hollywood will portray it as the Klan went around lynching black people. No. Regular Southerners did that. The Klan would show up after it sometimes just to take pictures. Yeah, we did this. They didn't do it. They talked big shit, okay? Tried to be as important as they... Tried to be super important, but they weren't that important. They were a two-bit outfit, really. Most of the time.
I wrote a lot. You know what is fucked up? I wrote a lot in my books about a lot of unsolved murders of, a lot of black activists and stuff like that, like around that time period. Some of it was Klan, but a lot of it was cops.
Cops, yeah.
It was cops.
Yeah. So
some of those cops were in the Klan too, but I'm just saying a lot of it was cops.
You didn't have to be in the Klan to do that. Matter of fact, a lot of the people that were doing what she's talking about, like I said, my family's from fucking Mississippi. Back when Mississippi burned, all right? My dad knew all about it. His father actually testified against some of these guys because he overheard them talking about it when they were playing pinball machines and he was a little kid. Had to do with they firebombed some things and some little girls got burned up. And that was nothing that turned. The Klan was not behind that. It was just teenage boys, white teenage boys. They were pro-segregationists, but they did not want any kind of racial integration. They were just kind of losers, really. But the South was kind of a lawless area. You had cops, right? But the cops a lot of times were the offenders.
They were, yeah.
Yeah. The cops were like the warrior class. So you'd have federal agents coming in here, and you'd have outsiders, and they would consider it like they're stirring up trouble down here. Well, they'd just kill them. Mm-hmm. They knew where they were because they knew what motel they were at.
Yep.
They'd come out of that motel and they'd pull them over with a police car and walk them out and fucking kill them.
And then just shoot them, yeah.
Yeah. And then they get their buddies jump in the car and drive their car somewhere and then ditch the car somewhere else. They never found the bodies.
I mean, amazingly, the bodies they did find, a lot of times an alarming amount of the suspects who they never caught, obviously, but a lot of the suspects were cops.
Yeah. In general, the Klan were shit talkers. They just shit talkers mostly. They weren't doing most of it. It was what you would call regular Southern people were doing it. But you see, it's very convenient nowadays for Southerners to go, well, no, so that was the Klan. Nah. Hollywood blew them up into
y'all.
Hollywood blew them up into the bad guys because shit, they got suits, so they must have did it. They got that white suit.
Like I said, they did do bad shit, but it wasn't always them. Like sometimes it was just regular ass people.
When the Klan did bad shit, they were doing the same kind of thing an average bad Southerner would have done. You know,
right? That's what I'm saying.
So, but most of the shit was just Southerners.
Yeah. Or cops, like I said.
Yeah,
a lot of times cops.
those were the cops. Yeah. And judges.
Yeah, that too.
And just guys that worked.
And I think that goes a long way towards saying like why a lot of those crimes from that time are unsolved still. Because I think a lot of the perps were cops.
The South did not want to be in the Union. It just didn't. So that was why. They were just trying to get the feds out of here. The Klan was interesting, though. They were kind of like, nowadays you'd call them conspiracy theorists. They're paranoid about coming off the damn gold standard. They didn't believe in the Federal Reserve Bank. They thought that you could jimmy that. They thought that Catholics would take over the United States and make it a theocracy. They had all kinds of worries. You know, they would pass little books and pamphlets around. Like, oh, the Catholics are taking over.
Danny says the money finding aspect was kind of cool from the movie. Yeah, and I think that was a movie only edition. I don't remember them mentioning that on the documentary, and I don't remember seeing that in anything about the Wyrick haunting. In the movie, if you haven't seen it, the little girl tells him, "Oh, Mr. Gordy said that there's money buried on the property." And the mom is just kind of like, "Shut up, what are you talking about?" But the dad's like, well, maybe there's something to that. So he goes and digs, him and the sister-in-law, and they find like a whole bunch of coins, like, you know, real expensive coins or whatever. But I don't think that happened in real life. But that was one of the things in the movie that kind of made them believe that, oh, maybe Heidi was telling the truth about this Mr. Gordy person, because it's like, hey, she knew the money was there. Zach says, I also hated the look of the cinematography in a lot of 2000s movies. Yeah, me too. So many scenes just washed in a single color, like teal or beige. Yeah, I kind of feel like all of the movies from that era were either like teal or orange. Yeah, it's like a filter over the whole thing. Yeah, it just looked so bad. It looked so bad. John Gora said the only remake I liked from that era was The Hills Have Eyes. That was actually pretty good.
Yeah, I liked that one.
Dawn of the Dead remake was okay.
Yeah,
honestly, the Dawn of the Dead remake, which I think came out in 2004, I think that was the best one.
Yeah.
Of all of the ones that came out. I mean, that was pretty fucking good. I saw that in the theater. He went a slightly different direction with it, but I thought they did a really good job. I didn't mind the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake. It wasn't great, but it wasn't as bad as I was expecting. So that's about as charitable as I'm gonna. But the other shit, like the Friday the 13th remake, like all the remakes they did, they were just lame. They were just kind of lame. Like I said, everybody looked like a model. It was just kind of like everything was like super slick. The thing that I liked about the original movies was like how grungy they were. You know what I mean? And how realistic they seemed. So if you're just going to make it look like a fucking music video, what's the point of that? That's not that kind of movie, you know what I mean? Especially if it's like a slasher or something like that. I just think that's so very silly. But let me see. Hold on. Talking about House of Wax. Yeah, so Danny Rowling said, so why did the Klan kill the conductor again in this film? Because he was helping slaves or because he was turning them into taxidermy figures? See, that's the thing. And I think that this was... and admittedly, I don't think they did a great job of getting this across in the movie. And please correct me if I'm wrong. I've seen this movie 2 times. That's it. But I think at first... they implied, I don't even think they implied it was the Klan. They kind of implied it was the Klan, but because they showed people putting some hoods on. But it wasn't Klan hoods. It was just like regular ass, like burlap sacks or whatever. So they just showed all of these people coming out and dragging out the conductor and stuffing him, you know what I mean? Like cutting him open and putting all like the taxidermy shit in there and like killing him. And so everybody nowadays thinks it's like, oh my God, all of these fucking racist ass people, like they knew that he was helping all the escaped slaves, so they killed him, you know, what a bunch of assholes. But I think the implication, the real story, and I think they only touched on this very briefly, was that either some of the escaped slaves or their friends or family members, something like that, found out that he was killing some of the people that he was supposedly helping, and they were the ones that killed him. Because I thought there was a scene with some of the other like escaped slaves that had gotten away coming back and putting the hoods on, and they killed him because they found out what he had did. So they weren't killing him because he was helping slaves. They were killing him because he was a serial killer, and they found out what he did. I thought that was, and like I said, I don't think they got that across very well because I wasn't sure. And then I read this other plot synopsis where they said, oh, the Klan like killed him because he was helping slaves. I'm like, yeah, but that's what you're supposed to think at the beginning, but then like I thought later on there was kind of like a flash where they showed that it was actually the escaped slaves themselves that came back and were like, hey, we know what you did, motherfucker, and we're gonna like kill you for it. And like, but they put hoods on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I thought that that's what they showed. You know what I'm saying? Hugo said I liked the Blob remake in 1988. Yeah, and
That's
I mean,
really
because we were talking about remakes from the 2000s, which a lot of those sucked. But I will argue that the 1988 remake of the Blob, one of the best horror remakes of all time. That is a great movie. And honestly, I like the original Blob too, but it's campy. You know, it's silly. All of the teenagers are 40 years old, which a lot of them were in the 50s. It's just they looked like that old. But the 88 one was great. I really liked it. The special effects were really good. We reviewed it not too long ago, didn't we? But yeah, I will... And I kind of feel like a lot of people maybe don't talk about it. But I think that's one of the best horror remakes ever. Maybe other than The Thing. Although, I did a video today. If you guys don't subscribe to my Scare Salon channel, you should. Go over there and do it right now. I just put up a video today, my top 5 favorite movies from 1982, because I'm doing my top 5 favorite movies from every year since I was born. And I'm on 1982 because this is the 10th video that I've done. And one of the ones was The Thing. And in there, I kind of got into an existential crisis about... Because I kind of feel like a lot of people see The Thing as a remake of The Thing from Another World from 1951. I would argue it's not exactly a remake. Is it?
What?
I mean, The Thing.
The Thing? No. No, it's an individual.
They're both based on the same book.
The Thing is Carpenter's Thing is kind of
closer to the book. The 1951 one is good too. We reviewed it not too long ago, but they had to change a lot because of the time period and because they didn't have the money, I guess, to do it the way it was in the book. So I kind of feel like in the 1951 version, it's just like a guy. Like the monster is just like a guy.
I read an illustrated novel a long time ago when I was a kid, based on the book. Who Goes There? I think, isn't it? Isn't it Who Goes There?
Yeah, it came out in 1938.
It's in general, it's like Carpenter's The Thing, but I remember it being very political too. When the thing took over a person, not only did that the alien didn't so much copy that person's behavior, it adopted that person's behavior. So, if I remember correctly, I was a little kid when I read it. The thing ends up being a hardcore capitalist.
Oh, now I'm gonna have to go read it. Like I read it when I was a teenager, but I don't remember.
Yeah, I think I remember. And it had to do with voting and capitalism and all kinds of stuff. So the alien itself was making kind of like poignant political comments in the comic that I read.
Which really neither of the movies did.
Did that? Yeah.
Not really.
It was kind of like a critique of America.
Okay.
You know what I'm talking about?
Which, yeah.
Like we got the best democracy money could buy. That kind of, it was that kind of shit.
Well, now I'm going to have to go reread it.
Yeah, I just
I was pretty young.
Something like that. But I was a little kid, though. I may be totally wrong. But
yeah, because it's been a long time since you read it.
And it was asking for people's proxies. That was another thing it was doing. So the alien was becoming like a human.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, I kind of got into a thing where it's like, I would kind of argue that maybe The Thing from 1982 is not exactly a remake. Because it's different enough. The setup is the same of the 1951 one and the 1982 one. But other than that, it's not really, I don't know. Like the general bones of it are similar, but it goes off in such a different direction that I don't really think it's a remake. Danny says, were the bodies found in the mine shaft the family members of the blind old black woman that went missing? Yeah, I thought that was the implication because it was the two that fell in love. You know what I mean? She found them like taxidermied down there, like in the secret whatever. And I was led to believe, unless I'm remembering it wrong, that she came there, and the grandson said to Andy that he's like, these two supposedly, escaped, or they were here, but then like they never got to where they were, and they never knew what happened to them. So I think that's who that was. But yeah, there was a bunch of other bodies down in there too. But yeah.
Ian said he watched it for the first time.
Wow.
Man, I can't believe that.
Well, I was kind of getting into that on my
probably,
other video too, because I'm just kind of like, it's kind of because we grew up in that era.
Yeah.
You know, it's easy for us to like, oh, everybody's seen that. You know what I mean? But then it's like, yeah, but then there's people that weren't born when that came out, obviously. And it's just like, and they might be like, you know, little baby horror fans too. And it's like, they've seen like all the new shit that comes out, but it's like now they have all this old shit they got to see. And I haven't even caught up on all the old shit, man. There's like still movies from the 30s and 40s that I want to see that I haven't seen yet.
My dad took me to see that like 3 times in a row. Sawmill Square Mall in Mississippi. The Thing. It scared the shit out of my dad. It scared the shit out of me. He loved it, though. I loved it, too. We're like, man.
It's a terrifying
Thinking
movie.
about what would happen if that thing got out. Yeah. Kurt Russell doing his thing, man. Kurt Russell in his prime.
I would argue, and I mentioned this in my other video that I put up today, too, that if the Thing, the monster from the Thing, was a real organism...
Oh, you'd be fucked.
Yeah, we would be so fucked.
Yeah. I would think nothing like that exists, or it'd have been
I would hope not. I would hope not.
Because as old as the Earth is, it'd have been here by now. Would have been here millions of years ago.
Yeah.
And it absorbed the planet.
It's funny because we watched...
Yeah.
Now, did we watch, was it Cinephiles React or was it Villagers React? To the Thing. To the Thing?
Yeah. Cinephiles.
So the Cinephiles, so it's 2 guys from, where are they from?
Pakistan.
Pakistan. 2
India.
Pakistani guys.
Yep.
Or India. Maybe it's India. I can't
They're
remember.
Muslim, but I think they're either India or Pakistan.
And they show them movies. And so I loved watching them like react to horror movies that they've never seen, like especially ones from the 80s. And they watched The Thing. It's interesting. It's interesting to me because you can see how something that is way before their time because they're young and they don't have any cultural context for it. They didn't grow up like watching these movies or anything like that, but it still resonated with them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They
Yeah. And what's funny is that they became big Arnold Schwarzenegger fans.
Yeah.
They love Arnold. Every time they see an Arnold movie, oh yeah.
Man, they were super into Terminator and Predator.
They fucking love that shit.
It's hilarious.
Yeah. So now they feel like they know Arnold. Every time they see him, they go, oh, okay, yeah. And Sylvester Stallone. They love Sylvester Stallone. Rocky and
they love
Rambo.
Rocky.
Yeah.
But I thought that was so funny that they watched The Thing and they got really into it. Like it scared the crap out of them.
Yeah. They weren't quite sure how it worked.
They kind of perceived it more as possession.
Like being possessed, yeah.
Rather than the alien like replicating.
Yeah.
I don't know if they ever got over that misperception.
Yeah.
Because they seem to talk about it as though it was like a possession deal, rather than like the alien like actually copying.
Yeah, and mimicking you.
The body.
Yeah.
I don't know if they actually got that.
No.
But it scared the crap out of them.
Yeah.
They also really liked. I thought this was really.
They love fucking Russell.
Yeah, they do. Well, he's fucking cool. Everybody the world over. I mean, everybody recognizes his coolness when they see it.
His hair, man, his beard. The other guy goes, his eye. He goes, he's a handsome man. Like,
he is a handsome man.
What's funny is that he looks like Pashtun though, or something. He looks Arabic because he got that big full beard and
he's got like so much hair and
like facial hair and shit. Yeah, they liked it.
They also really liked The Sixth Sense, which I thought was very entertaining. Yeah. And we watched one the other day. They watched because I was curious to see like how a comedy would translate. They watched The Hangover, and they thought that shit was hilarious.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're plugging that channel. What's it called again?
It's called Cinephiles React.
Cinephiles.
There's another one called Villagers React.
Yeah.
Which is kind of along the same lines.
Cinephiles is better. It's got better guys.
But Cinephiles is better. Like I like those 2 guys. They're two younger guys.
Yeah, in their 20s. They're real intelligent guys. But they don't have any of the cultural context, but they don't need it. They learned it. They became Arnold Schwarzenegger fans and Sylvester Stallone fans, kind of like we did back in the 80s, where Sylvester Stallone and Arnold, you're kind of, well, which one do you like better? Because that battle was going on back then.
Yeah.
In all young men's minds. Which one was better? Well, they're already...
So they're just getting that now.
They're just getting that now.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's funny that it's just like this many years later, it's like they're getting that, so and they're having the same arguments that people had like when we first saw that shit back in the... It's just like hilarious. Yeah. Ian England says maybe we are things. See, we wouldn't know, would we? John Gore said, I like the bit where the old doctor is figuring out how to take the thing like 2 years to take the whole Earth.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's what's so scary about that movie is that it really did a lot with that concept and John Carpenter seemed to realize, or, you know, maybe this might have been in the original book too, but it's just like if an organism like this came to Earth, it would take like no time at all for it to like wipe out the human race.
Yeah.
It would just take it over. You know what I mean?
And it's part of his Lovecraftian series.
Yeah.
And he said, what's that guy do with Lovecraft? Well, the original book, the creature was kind of like that, but Lovecraft talked about a creature that's like that too, a Shaggoth.
Yeah.
In Mountains of Madness, and the thing is basically a Shaggoth, which was an amoeba-like alien creature that got enslaved as basic labor. They weren't intelligent. They had an animal intelligence, but their bodies could become anything it needed to build. They used them for construction. Somehow the Shaggoth got a hold of a brain out of one of the old ones, which are the aliens that ran them, and then they passed that information through each other, and they all became as intelligent as an old one, and they rebelled and killed them. And they did that on Earth too. That's why the alien city was abandoned when they found it on Antarctica, because all the Shaggoths killed everybody, and then they froze to death, if I remember correctly. Well, some of them were still alive. They were in hibernation. Well, that's kind of the genesis of this story. It was frozen in hibernation when they found it. And it was an alien. There was a spaceship there instead of a city. But it'd be real close to kind of like in the Mountains of Madness. Had it been a city instead of a flying saucer that they found.
Well, it is very Lovecraftian.
Yeah. But the thing is I also think some of the old ones were alive in the book. Weren't some of the old ones alive? They looked frozen, but they weren't.
Yeah, that's what I remember.
They had wings and shit. They looked like a pod with a bunch of tentacles on the bottom of them. And then I think there were some Shaggoths that were still alive. But they could absorb you and copy you. So they were good for construction.
Yeah.
It was just a big amoeba.
Which, like I said, that's scary as shit, I think.
Yeah.
I would argue that the thing in The Thing is the scariest monster ever. And I don't even know if you could make one scarier than that.
You couldn't beat it.
That's what I mean. You couldn't defeat it. There would just be no way. No way.
Civilization couldn't do it.
Nope.
It can only be done by individuals, and there'd be not enough strong individuals to do it. You'd be outnumbered. Kind of like the body snatchers. It'd be the same way.
Yeah, similar. Over. Well, yeah, because there'd really be no way of knowing who you were dealing with.
Yeah.
That's what's so great about that movie is that nobody knows who's the thing and who's not.
Yeah. See, the alien xenomorphs, that'd be easy. Oh, you just need guns with those. You can easily identify the damn alien, so you can fight him.
Yeah, because obviously they look like aliens.
And they didn't have technology. Well, the thing could impersonate a person and use technology. So
because it knew whatever the person
knew everything
knew.
was, and they would just take over. And if you just were alone with one, you couldn't beat it.
Hosed.
You couldn't beat it.
We'd be totally hosed.
Yeah, and they could make alien technology. It made a damn flying saucer out of fucking helicopter parts.
Yep, it did. Like I said, we would be super screwed if that happened in real life. DVD Dragon said the part in The Blob 1988 where that guy got broken in half and pulled through the bookcases. Oh, I love that. It's like, it broke my brain. The guy getting pulled down the pipes. Oh, man, I remembered that scene for like years and years afterward. He said lots of gnarly kills in that movie. That's what's fucking great about it. It's the gore in that is so great. Just so good. Hugo said the prequel, The Thing 2011, was not bad. Didn't like the CGI. Yeah, I kind of wish they'd gone more practical, but I actually quite liked that. We saw it in the theater.
They went practical. They did all that shit in practical effects, and then the company said, nah, let's go ahead and do CG over the practical effects. So it looks like a new movie. Underneath that CG, there's practical effects under there. They said they were good. They ought to release a damn practical version of it now. But I don't think the movie really
they should, man.
Yeah.
I mean, they probably make some more money on it.
Yeah.
Because you're going to have crotchety old farts like me that it's just kind of like, and I said this in my video too, because I would argue that the effects in The Thing, which came out 40 years ago?
Yeah.
They still look amazing.
Yeah, they're good. You can tell it's an effect, but
sure.
But you can also tell that those objects are there and the people are interacting with them. So
because the thing about it is when you see CGI, I can also tell that is an effect because it doesn't look like it's really there. And all I can picture in my mind is the actor farting around on a blue screen.
Yeah.
And them adding it all later. So I'm always going to be a big advocate of like interacting with shit that's actually there.
I think 2011 was a good one though.
It was. I actually did like that.
I've rewatched it many times. It's good.
Yeah, we've seen it several times. We saw it in the theater, and he bought it, and like we've watched it probably 4 or 5 times since then, and I actually really liked it.
You know, another one that I like, Predator 1 really I think is the best movie ever made, of its type at least. Predator 2 is okay, but I actually like Predators.
I liked that as well.
Yeah, where they're on the alien reserve planet. Well, when I first saw it, I go, yeah, this is pretty good. It's pretty good. But then the more I watched it, the more I liked it. That's a fucking excellent movie. It's right there with the first one. Although I'm gonna give it to the first one, but it's in that same ballpark. And I don't give a shit what people say. I like fucking AVP 1 and 2.
They're all right. They're entertaining.
Yeah, they're fun. Just extra shit. Now that last Predator movie though, the one the Predator,
it is alright.
It is alright.
I could take it or leave it.
The one with the Indians was a little bit better.
Prey,
yeah.
the one that was on Hulu.
A little bit better.
I actually liked that one.
The only thing I didn't like about that was it didn't quite feel authentic. Those people didn't really look like Native Americans to me. They looked too clean.
A lot of them were, but they should have dirtied them up.
They looked too clean. They looked too modern with modern hair, and they didn't look like people that were actually surviving in the wilderness. They would look a lot harder. Those people look like they were middle class people from suburbia. Is what they look like.
Well, they probably are because they're actors.
Right.
Sebastian says, Rob Bottin or Dean Cundy. Are you asking me who did the effects on the thing or which one I like better? Because that's going to be Rob Bottin all day long. Dean Cundy's good too, though. Let's see. Zach says, a movie that always impressed me for its VLX was the first Silent Hill movie. Yeah, the effects in that were really good. And I don't shit on CGI. I'm not one of those cranky old motherfuckers that's just kind of like, oh, everything new sucks. And it's like, I don't want to be like that. But I will say that if you made a movie in the 1990s with CGI, with the exception of Jurassic Park, which still looks great, and you watch it nowadays, that CGI is going to look like ass.
Yeah.
It's just the nature of the beast. But practical effects, if they're done well the first time, they don't age.
Yeah.
Because that's there, and somebody made that.
Look at Jurassic Park. Some of the best CGI you'll find right there, man.
1993, that fucking thing came out, and it still looks good.
And it's CG, but it looks good.
It still looks good. So it can be done.
Yeah.
I prefer CGI to be used for just like backgrounds or
erase footprint,
like shit like that, like little shit. You know what I mean?
Sebastian said the thing couldn't have been McCready. What do you say there?
McCready wasn't the thing unless they were at war with each other. Yeah.
No,
I mean,
McCready wasn't the thing.
He wasn't.
Neither was Childs.
I don't think Childs was the thing either.
No, because he's got an earring in.
Yeah.
He's got an earring. So
and I thought they pretty much showed that.
Yeah, they showed the earring glimmer, but they never really fucking. That Carpenter was slick.
I gotta pee.
You see the earring gleam, but they don't make it important.
Yeah.
You have to figure it out for yourself that the thing can't replicate an earring. And in 2011, they spelled it out. It can't replicate earrings, and it can't replicate fillings. So, no. Childs was a human too. But what's being implied at the end of the first thing, what's implied is that McCready kills Childs and roasts him with the flamethrower. Because, remember in the beginning of the movie, McCready's playing chess with the computer, and he loses. So he takes a glass of whiskey on the rocks and pours it into the computer and shorts it out and calls it a cheating bitch. Well, they're just trying to let you know that McCready is not a guy that plays by the rules. He will cheat and call other people a cheater. Okay. He's kind of,
yeah, I like that. It was kind of like a nice bit of foreshadowing.
Yeah. Well, when Childs comes down to say, yeah, I got lost in the snow. What do we do now? And then McCready goes, I don't know. Let's just wait and see. And he hands him the whiskey, and Childs drinks the whiskey. All right, and I think that was the time you see the earring. But then they pan back over McCready. And McCready doesn't, I don't think he noticed the earring. And then that's it. That's the other one. Boom, 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 boom.
Yeah.
So my take on it is that it was, here's cheating bitch. And then he was going to fucking hit him with the flamethrower. Because why would you take the chance? You're both going to die anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think they had both, like, kind of gotten to that point.
And if you freeze to death when the rescue party comes, you're going to revive the thing.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't surprise me if McCready fried. Pretty sure McCready fried Childs, and then probably himself.
Because that's kind of it's kind of the responsible thing to do. Like I said, you don't want the thing getting out.
Yeah. But McCready was a knucklehead. He was a man of his time. All right. He's running around blowing the thing up with fucking dynamite. Blowing little pieces of that shit everywhere.
That's kind of what we were thinking.
Freezing out in the fucking snow.
I was like, those are going to wake back up, dude.
Yeah, he's spreading it. He's
spreading it farther.
Spreading the infection around.
Right. Trying to get rid of
know?
it. I mean, he didn't know.
That's something a dude that grew up in the 70s would do.
Yeah, it's just like, let's just blow it up.
Blow that shit up. Because that's the kind of dude McCready was.
Right.
Fucking,
well, like I said,
Russell's perfect for that. Man.
In his defense, like I said, they'd never dealt with anything like this, like an organism. So they didn't know necessarily. Right, I'm imagining that, like, later on, after they realized that, like, every little piece of it was its own little thing and could go off and do its own shit, they were probably like, oh man, we, like, blew it up and there's pieces of it all over the place.
Yeah.
So it's like it probably escaped. And that's what I mean. If that was a real organism, you'd never be able to contain it, ever. No. If, like, the smallest little piece of it that broke off could go do its own shit and, like, end up replicating something else later on, you could never... You can never fight that.
When the outpost doesn't make regular radio checks, they're going to go down there and see the outpost is going to be fucking cooked. And they're going to fucking find little pieces of things and try to bring bodies back that are fucking alien bodies frozen. Because they left a lot of those behind.
Yep.
And
like I said,
it'll get out. They'll take all that stuff back to warm climate and it'll thaw out and kill people. So it's the Earth is fucked.
Pretty much, yeah.
It's fucked. Yeah.
I mean, and I love
they
that
didn't save shit. They just delayed
I love that they never made a sequel to that either, because The Thing 2011, that's a prequel. That's about the Norwegian camp.
Yeah.
So, and I like that, but I like that they just never could. They were just like, yep. That's
if you make a sequel, it's going to be they go down there and they find them fucking bodies and they start taking them back and they find all this weird biomatter and take it back and then it infects everybody. And it's in a warm climate now and it's going to be out of control. It's going to be like World War Z, except it's fucking. That'd make a good movie. But humans couldn't win.
No.
No.
Yeah, it would have to have like a super bleak ending.
Yeah. You'd have 3 years of fighting it, and you just
each
year
you
get harder
fail.
and harder because there'd be less people.
You would fail.
Yeah.
I mean, pretty much. Yeah, and I said that in my video. I said if that was a real monster, like you would have no way to defeat it. No way. We would be hosed big time.
And that's what a superior biological life form would be like.
Mm-hmm.
There'd be no defeating it.
John Gore said, I assume he's talking about The Thing, gave a sense of doom right off the bat. Yeah. Like the guys were already breaking down and the winter already started. Yeah. And I argued in my video that I posted earlier, I think that The Thing might have one of my favorite opening sequences of any movie ever. I love that sequence of like the Norwegian guy and they're like shooting at the dog because it pulls you right in. Yeah. Like, what the fuck is going on? Like, why are you shooting at a dog? That's like such a crazy...
Yeah, and there's no subtitles, and
you don't know what he says.
Americans don't know Norwegian, and he says that is not a dog.
That's not a dog. It's not a dog.
You idiot.
But they don't know what he's saying.
He can't understand what he's saying.
There's like, why are you shooting at a dog? You fuckface. Which is what anybody would think. That's why it's so great. That's why it's so great. I think that's one of the best opening sequences, like in cinema history. Seriously, it's so good. It just like pulls you right in because you're just like, oh my god, what the fuck is going on here? Yeah, John Gore said it also establishes that these dudes on this Arctic base have a problem with feminized civilization and women. Yeah, kind of. I liked that it was all men, though. I didn't mind that there was women in the second one because whatever.
How does it establish they have any problem with that? That was normal guys at the time.
Yeah,
Yeah, there wasn't anything about that.
And he said he goes Colonel Kurtz pretty quick. Yeah. He does, yeah. But like I said, it's an alien. You wouldn't necessarily understand that it could... I mean, you would think, oh, it's just an animal and you can just blow it up. I mean, that kills pretty much anything on Earth, right? So you wouldn't understand that it's just kind of like, oh, little pieces of it could replicate.
Yeah.
So you can't blame them completely. They were just out of their depth.
I don't know how old you are, but even when I was coming up in the military, it was one of the outposts I was on, OP 311. It was only 6 men. It's all men. We were on a desert island in the Gulf of Aqaba. The whole Army infantry was just men. So for 4 years, I just saw just men. That's what they're doing. It's being on a research station up there, just in that era, it would have been all men. It'd be like working on a damn oil rig. But they'd probably be there for a year long, 6 months or 1 year rotations, probably. Year on, year off. There'd probably other teams taking their places. Yeah, but they have guys that lived like that their whole lives.
Yeah.
Some of them at sea, similar to how a guy at sea lives.
Ian said, wasn't he kind of implied to be a war vet? Kurt Russell's character,
Yeah, he was chopper pilot from Vietnam.
Yeah, that's right.
Army
they did say that, didn't they? Well, because he's only just seen it.
Yeah, he's wearing Army stuff.
Yeah.
And Childs is wearing Army stuff too. He's wearing an Army black sweater, so he's probably also Army. The other guy's like, Windows. He seems to be Navy. The communicator, I think he's wearing Navy stuff. So they're ex-military, a lot of them. And then that one scientist, the one that was doing one that was helping, he had an earring in his ear.
Mm-hmm.
He's an old guy with an earring in his ear. In that era, the only men that wore earrings in their ear were merchant marines and guys that had crossed the equator. And then they put that earring in. So you're talking about men of the sea and military guys.
Yeah. Which, like I said, I think that was one of the things that makes that movie so good. Is
you got to be hardened to long periods of time of fucking solitude and just being around dudes, and learn how to live with other people.
And being in this place that you can't really
and being in a place
leave.
You can't do anything. I did it, man.
You can't really get anywhere. You're like in the middle of... That was Antarctica, right?
It's Antarctica.
It's Antarctica, yeah. The base.
Yeah, you had to deal with isolation, but you got to be in a tight group. You can't turn on one another. Which
but that's
what happened.
But see, that's what made this movie so great, is that these dudes, you presume up until this point had to rely on each other for survival, because you would, and now it's like you don't know if this dude is who you think it is anymore.
Right.
So it's like now everybody's just like, I don't trust you, you don't trust anybody, and it's like the whole fucking shit breaks down.
Yeah, because that whole unit is based on that type of cohesion.
Sure.
And when that got attacked, that's it.
Yeah.
Every man for himself on the fucking bottom of the earth.
Yeah.
No one there to save you.
Yeah. That's what makes that movie so scary to me. Yeah. That's what makes it such a great horror movie.
No cell phones. This is another era.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Help was weeks away.
And even if you could get to somebody that's like they couldn't get there.
And the only thing that would come would be a helicopter. Which is going to only have a couple guys on it.
Yeah. It's like, what are they going to do?
What can they do for you?
Like I said, they probably just spread the thing further.
Yeah.
Danny also says, Burnt Offerings and American Werewolf in Paris should get theater re-releases with touched-up werewolf CGI and added old Mother Ghost CGI for Burnt Offerings, just like the Star Wars. I don't know if I agree with that or not. Because, look, I love Burnt Offerings. That's one of my favorite movies of the 70s, one of my favorite haunted house movies of all time. Book is great, too. I think it was better that they just left it ambiguous, that you don't ever see the old lady. Because... as I've said before, I think we talked about this before, but I don't think, and at least according to the book, I was under the impression that the mother, Mrs. Allardyce, or Mother Allardyce, didn't exist, at least not in a human form. I thought she was like the essence of the house, so she wasn't a person, you know what I mean? She was like some kind of weird being, or I don't even know if I'd go that far. I think she's just like a force. So, because in the book, I think, she opens the door and there's just like a bright, like a white light. She doesn't see anything, you know what I mean? So I think that it's better to leave it like that. Because, like I said, I think the house in that was implied to be a living entity, or like a living organism of some kind that fed off human energy. So it didn't have to have a human component, but that was just kind of like the face. Like I said, and I think I made this comparison before, it's almost kind of like when you see the movie The Shining, you see Lloyd, the bartender, who is kind of like, he's not a real person, but that's just how Jack Nicholson's character, that's how Torrance is seeing him. Like, he's just seeing, like, the hotel being personified, like, in this one person. But that's not a real person. So I think it's kind of like the same thing with burnt offerings. I think the house is a living organism, you know, and it doesn't have... So the mom isn't a real person either. All right, so are you ready to...
Shut it down.
Shut it down.
Shut it on down.
All right. So we're going to wrap up this discussion because it's getting kind of past 9 o'clock, I guess. And hopefully I might do a stream tomorrow. I'll see. I did watch the Limehouse Golem today, which somebody recommended to me, which is actually really good. So if I get that together, I might do it tomorrow, or I might do it Thursday. We'll see. But Wednesday night, we're going to do our show. And this is actually kind of a cool case. Somebody recommended doing this like a long time ago, and it finally won like in the polls. This is, it was a murder case back in the early 20th century that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was involved in. It was a murder case, and there was a guy named Oscar Slater who was wrongfully convicted of it and spent a long time in jail. So we're going to talk about that on the show on Wednesday night. It should be really interesting. Like I said, it's a really interesting case. So hopefully you guys can all drop by for that. So thanks for dropping by and hanging out with us this evening. And we'll see you guys again on Wednesday night. Good night.